Anne has, she's on the Excel. Well, good for you. I've not done the Excel. Mostly Amtrak from Boston to DC and back. Well, that's a great route. That's a great route. I got to admit, Amtrak's strength is this Northeast corridor between Washington and Boston. So there's lots of routes available for that. We'll look at that later and see that. I am a lifelong train traveler with lots of experience on Amtrak, including overnight travel and a roommate, train traveler, train lover. I've traveled besides a lot of train in the US. I have traveled on trains in other countries. In fact, I just came back from 3 weeks in Italy where we took a train trip, went on something kind of like Amtrak between Assisi and Florence, was about a 2.5 hour train ride. But I've been on Amtrak a lot. I've been on Amtrak in a few years for various obvious reasons. A lot of us haven't traveled as much as I've been traveling in more recent years. In the last year or so, it's been either by car, foot, bike, or by plane, but haven't done any train travel yet, but I intend to this year. So anyway, yeah, that's actually a picture out of my sleeper window in the morning, traveling through the Allegheny Mountains. That's actually, this viaduct was at once upon a time a train ran up there. There was a train bridge, train viaduct, and now it's a bike path. And I've actually ridden that bike path across that bridge over the train track. So there's lots of advantages of traveling by train. Let me share some of them with you. First of all, it can be less expensive depending on the route. There's some unique things to look at there. It mostly has to do with distance and time, how long you're going to take, because if you can travel, for example, from Chicago to Seattle, probably cheaper by train than you can by flying, but you're going to spend 2 nights on the train and the coach, which I wouldn't advise anyone doing. But mostly, like, let's say the Northeast corridor between Boston, New York, Washington, D.C., down to the Carolinas, various places, it can be cheaper than flying. It is a more relaxing experience. I find train travel pretty relaxing. You don't have to go through security. There aren't the crowds. It's easier getting on and off the train than a plane where everyone, lines up and slaps down their boarding pass, and you go in and put your, luggage in the overhead bin, and then people jostle by you and it takes forever. Anyway, the train isn't that way. Another advantage is you tend to go city center to city center. So Anne was mentioning Boston. I know that Boston Logan Airport's out on the north edge of the city. I know that in New York, and in Washington, the airports, other than Reagan National Airport, are well outside the city. And so if you take, for example, a train from New York to Washington, you do find yourself going city center to city center. So you don't have to get out to the airport, don't have to go through all the security and everything. So it's very handy. It is also the most environmentally friendly. I'll be showing you all a chart on various, the carbon impact of various forms of travel. And also it has become more and more able to make an easy connection to bus service. So Amtrak's realized that since they can't go everywhere, they have bus services that they connect to, maybe their own, but more likely someone else. So for example, in Washington, D.C., the bus terminal for the city is right there in the Amtrak station, Union Station, Washington. This just gives you an idea of where Amtrak goes in the U.S. It does connect most of the population centers. There's some areas that it doesn't go through. You can see big swatches of South Dakota, Wyoming, Idaho. There's no train, but if you think about the population centers, there aren't that many people living there. The one exception I can see, of course, is Boise, Idaho, which is down here in Southwest Idaho. And by the way, has a beautiful train station still. Too bad the train doesn't go up there from, say, Salt Lake City. Maybe someday they'll get it to go from Salt Lake to, say, Portland and go through Idaho. You can see going through the Southeast, it's a lot of these smaller cities. Of course, the biggest corridor is, like, say, Portland, Boston, down to Washington, D.C., Richmond. And by the way, they're adding capacity between Washington and Richmond. Just looking at the carbon footprint of travel, this is the most carbon intensive use down to the least. The most carbon intensive would be a domestic flight. So that'd be going like New York to Chicago, something like that. The next most is, by the way, this chart is from the UK. which is why you've got carbon measured in grams per kilometer. So, and also, like it says, petrol, that's gas. So a medium car petrol uses 192. Actually, a medium car in England is smaller than ours. So I would say that a medium car in the US is rivaling the carbon usage of a domestic flight. Then there's a diesel car in England. Short haul flight, that's like going, say, Washington to New York or Charlottesville to Washington. Long haul flight, that's overseas or from one coast to the other. That's more efficient still. Then going way down to a bus, that's 105 grams per kilometer. Which is more efficient than a motorcycle. And of course, if you put two people in a gas car, as you can see, 96 is half of 192. So that is more efficient when you put more people in a car. An electric vehicle, I happen to drive an electric vehicle. It's nice to know that it's and of all the types of vehicles, it is the most efficient. Of course, you put two people in an electric vehicle and you're beaten going by the National Rail. That's the British train. So it gives you an idea. The trains are way down here in terms of carbon usage. Ferries even less. And the Eurostar, yeah, I got to take that Eurostar someday. It is the most carbon efficient way to travel. Probably the only thing that beats it is walking. Any questions about that chart before I move on? You'll get the link to this in your note. Okay, some of the disadvantages of traveling by train. It can be more expensive. That again depends on the distance and where you're going. Arrivals and departures are not always reliable. However, they have gotten a whole lot more reliable than they used to be. I think lately my wife goes to New York a couple times a year to see our daughter on the Amtrak, and lately they've been right on time, leaving and coming. They don't connect everywhere. You saw that map that shows you they don't connect all cities. So there are places they don't go, and the travel times and dates are not always convenient. So let's say you're going between Chicago and Albuquerque, New Mexico on a train. It might, if you want to get off in Kansas, you'll be getting off in the middle of the night. Same thing going between Chicago and Washington, D.C. Going to get off in Pittsburgh. Either way, you're going to get off in the middle of the night. So. Any more questions about the advantages, disadvantages? Feel free to put your questions in the chat. This is a very interactive class. I love all of your questions or comments. I thank Anne, who has already put quite a few helpful comments in the chat. Looks like she's had quite a bit of experience traveling on Excella. I'd like to hear about that Excella. You can also get a 30-day pass, which allows you 10 segments within 30 days. A segment is every time you get on or off a train. That doesn't mean just like getting off, just look around for a minute. I mean, it's like getting off and changing trains or you're done. So let's say Washington, D.C. to Chicago is a single segment on the Capital Limited. Washington to New York can be a single segment. You must use your pass 120 days from the time that you purchase it. So you have to do all those 10 segments within 30 days. So it's a good thing, like if you want to travel the country or something like that, that's the time to get this pass. The cost is $499. Recently, I think back in the early April, I saw it was on sale for $399. A year ago, it was on sale for $299.